Hi, thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. We're going to go ahead and get started in 2 minutes. Thank you so much for joining us. We're going to go ahead and get started in 1 minute.
Good afternoon. This is Jacob Bardeen I'm with the CSA-DC chapter events committee, and I'll be hosting or introducing our speaker just momentarily, going to wait about another 30 seconds and then we'll get started. Okay, good afternoon. This is Jacob Bardeen again. I'm with the CSA-DC chapter. Thanks to everyone for joining, and thank you to Checkpoint for sponsoring this session. It's a very great pleasure for me to introduce our speaker today. I've known Grant for quite a while. For better, for worse, as you get a little older, you know people for longer periods of time. So anyway, I think we're in for a special treat. Grant is the Chief Cybersecurity Evangelist for Checkpoint Software, Checkpoint Technologies. For more than 20 years, Grant has been sharing his insights on how businesses can best protect themselves from sophisticated cyber attacks in an increasingly complex world. As Checkpoint's chief evangelist, he travels the world, or used to travel the world, I should say, enthralling audiences with his passionate and relational storytelling at conferences like RSA, Next 100, CIOs, and numerous media events. Grant's wide range of cybersecurity experience informs his talks, having served in diverse roles from sales, marketing, business development, and senior leadership for Dome9, Blue Coat, Neustar, and Altor Networks, also as CEO of Meta Info, which was then acquired by Neustar. Grant is the host of the Talking Cloud podcast on cloud security. So with that, let me turn this over to Grant. And again, I think we're in for a special treat here. So all yours, Grant.
Jacob, wow. I can't tell you how awesome it was to get that email from you the other day indicating that we were going to be together again. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm so thrilled and excited to be here, especially because I get a chance to reconnect with Jacob. Just for reference, Jacob and I worked together, the last time there was a major shift in computing, right, Jacob? It was when, thank you, Stanford, we all saw virtualization come to fore, and very similar to what I'll be talking about, Jacob and I recall when man, we had all these cool new things, right? vMotion, inter-VM communications. How do we see that stuff? How do we control that stuff, right? Sprawl was a big problem. Well, now, ladies and gentlemen, I would suggest it's only exacerbated because back then, at least we had to be in the data center, right, Jacob? I had to get into that ESX server. Today, I just got to get to the cloud, which we all know is ubiquitous and accessible anywhere. So, hey, really great to see you, Jacob. Thanks very much. I'm going to go ahead and get my screen set up and we're going to get started. So ladies and gentlemen, thanks for that little moment of remembrance with my friend Jacob. I'm going to get out of the way for you. And hopefully this is going to work for everyone. I see a lot of names: David, Doug, George, Gustavo, Jim, John, Kurt, Kathleen, Nancy, I'm missing, I'm sure, several. Sitarma, thank you all very, very much for being here. I really appreciate it. I'm going to try to make it as informative as I possibly can, entertaining maybe a little bit. Want to throw in some stats, which, by the way, I'm going to switch my screens quickly because I wanted to just point out, I always like to throw out some current stats so we know, what's going on in this business that we're trying to achieve resiliency with. And I was just really taken by some of the, today, according to Sky High, cloud apps have nearly tripled since 2013. There's nearly 1,500 different services available today. It's expected by the end of this year, 83% of company workloads are going to be in the cloud. 83%. Literally more than 80% are reporting they are fully multi-cloud. And so it's there's a Captain Obvious slide that I'm going to get to here. But here's what we're going to talk about. There are many and numerous challenges, and they're really unbelievably broad today because the cloud is not like it used to be. It is really, I was just looking at a report from Gartner, and there's so many different aspects, nuances of cloud security. Achieving the resiliency we're talking about is really a challenge. Now, security is, this isn't your father's Oldsmobile. This isn't your original, on-premise computing world. And so often we kind of approach it that way. It's having a very severe impact. We'll talk about that and ways organizations really truly can be more resilient. And, my son, I was explaining it to him. He's 20, college student. I said, resilient is how quickly you can bounce back to go back out the next night compared to me, right? Resiliency is fully understanding everything is changing. We need to put in as much of the very best infrastructure and solutions we can so that we can accommodate that constant flux, that constant change. Now, I mentioned a Captain Obvious slide. This is it, because we know this is happening. We see it happening, and it's going to continue to happen more and more. But I really want to point out that, so often we kind of start on this rudimentary discussion about cloud and the evolution. And the fact of the matter is, you all know this, you're very likely using multi-cloud already today. And the challenges, we see them in the headlines every day. Now, hopefully there's a few folks that have a hairline similar to mine and can remember this gentleman. And I really thought, here we go. I apologize, but this happens occasionally. And what I generally say is now a word from our sponsor. This is Microsoft's free moment because I crash and then am able to recover, and it'll be right back up and before your very eyes in a moment. And thank you very much, Microsoft. So hopefully have we recovered sufficiently? please, Jacob or someone say, yes, you can see my screen.
Yep, you're good.
Good. I thought so. Okay, back to Captain Obvious. And it's just the whole idea that, I was talking earlier with Jacob at the onset and discussing how we met. And it really was the last time we went through this really tectonic shift in the way we compute. I point this out because the nuances and subtleties and differences as you go into multi-cloud, it's very, very lumpy. Not every cloud provider offers the exact same set of APIs. Not every cloud provider offers the same path to get to the summit, so to speak. And as a result, it creates challenges for you as you move to multi-cloud. And this is one of the areas where virtually every cloud provider will acknowledge they're not out to build the very best user interface and tools for their competitor. They're focused on their self, but you all are using more than one for a variety of reasons, right? You're maybe heavy into Active Directory, and Microsoft plays a key role. Amazon doesn't give a hoot about Active Directory. Amazon, maybe you started early and you've been using AWS for a long, long time, and you're deep into functions and infra as code. There are various paths each one of you are taking. So to just broad brush it and say, hey, we're all multi-cloud, it's really much more challenging than that. Now, I was talking about George Carlin, and I thought this was such a great line because this, to me, really speaks to what's going on. We're all, look, I got to pause for a second and kind of go linear a little bit. I was working for Dome9 in 2018. We get hired or acquired by Checkpoint 3 months after I joined my old friend Zohar Alan. That was kind of the start of when things just really started taking off, fall of 2018. 2019, I traveled 270,000 miles. I spoke all around the globe, and then I didn't. And you all know what's happened. The fact of the matter is, for the last 17 months, I haven't traveled but one time for work. What a transformation. My point is, every organization on the planet was told to go home and shelter in place, but still stay in business. This thrust the cloud on all of us overnight. We were already in digital transformation mode. This said entire organizations going digital. And there was only one computing environment that really could accommodate it at the pace, speed at which we needed it. And it was a cloud. Now, the thing is, the cloud can accommodate us. The speed, the elasticity, the ability, it can accommodate us. But we have to understand it. And I'm telling you, ladies and gentlemen, one of the biggest mistakes I hear repeatedly from executives on my podcast, Talking Cloud, is you can't do it the way you've always done it. And that's what we've all, come on, that's what we do, right? How have I done it in the past? I apply that knowledge for future endeavors. That can be a risk. Furthermore, things can go so fast and automation starts to occur, which is what you have to do, because if you don't automate, they're going to get you. They're going to beat you. You're not going to be able to stay at the pace of cloud, really take advantage of the cloud. You have to find tools that enable you to automate. And this is a big challenge. Now, I mentioned briefly this whole COVID thing, right? Do I need to harp on it anymore? I don't think so. But it really was remarkable how it changed our computing environments, how it forced this transformation. You were used to a couple of dozen on the VPN, not all 6,800 or 600 or 5,000 or however many employees you have. Now, what this did overnight was exponentially increase the attack surface for you and every other organization. Furthermore, this is a new way of interacting with computing, and the bad guys knew it and they exploited it. In fact, in Q2 of 2020, phishing attacks alone were up 3,900%. Just remarkable. And we all know about ransomware. Just an interesting stat, 2019 ransomware cost businesses globally around $11.5 billion. In 2020, $20 billion. Huge. And all of this is because that attack surface went so much larger. Now, the other things that are especially unique to the Western world, especially in government, is this long tail of technology that we drag with us, right? That app that still hasn't been ported, moved, changed, and is running in a mainframe or running on some old OS or environment. This is one of the banes of our existence, and we have it, and we, other countries and other places around the world, interestingly enough, don't have it quite as much as we do because we've been in technology for so long. We need to get to the new technologies. It's really a conundrum. Additionally, what makes it very difficult, little side stat here, we all know economically things are kind of coming back, right? But even with the global economic growth that we're seeing, according to the Global Economic Fund, even with the return of growth, it's not enough, at least so far, to eclipse or supersede the dip we saw 2019 to 2020. Also, Wedbush claims that every one of us are going to be buying more cybersecurity to improve and increase our overall security, whether it's more tools, better threat hunting tools, supply chain tools because of the whole SolarWinds thing. And they're forecasting an increase by as much as maybe 20%. Well, that's diametrically opposed, right? I'm being told to invest more, lock down more, control more, secure more, but do it all with less of everything. This is really creating a challenge, and frankly, it's causing organizations to look at new and different ways to solve the problem. Now, what's happening to the business is, look, I talked to a friend of mine whose son is going to school at Harvard, taking computer science and information systems, IT. But the point was security, and the introduction of security overall in this course came at the end. And this is fundamentally one of the things that we really need to change. We need to put it so that that first step is with the thought of and the idea of architecting a secure environment. I mean, to be fair, we started this whole thing called the internet on this idea of trusting. And now we know we're trying to turn that inside out, going to a zero trust, and it's very, very difficult. We talked a little, Jacob and I, with all of you about, some of the interesting challenges when you had that ESX server and all of a sudden you could virtualize things and get to a reasonable utilization of your compute, but there were new problems, new challenges. This is exacerbated today because now it's out there. And just who's accessing your data, what's accessing your data, what applications, what functions, what customers. This can be really, really challenging as you have an S3 bucket or a blob storage that is being accessed by so many different potential access points, human and otherwise. We know this from the starting. This is the fundamental starting point. I'm not going to belabor this too much, but it again is also a new problem. We talk about sprawl, like sprawl. Sprawl is a huge issue in the cloud because you got a developer that builds an app just for testing, but then when he disables it, tears it down, he forgets to remove something. She forgets to delete something. This happens, and the ticker continues to go, and you're paying the bill. All the while, the pace is remarkable. The speed is unbelievable, and it's actually one of the challenges that we're all facing. We need to exploit it. We need to take advantage of it. But the only way to really do that is to understand the tools, understand how to secure the tools. So let's kind of break these down. I mentioned this earlier. We have to shift our cultural view of security information systems. I mean, again, nobody expected the internet to be the backbone for every business on the planet, okay? And so we need to really understand how to leverage these environments with a fully zero trust model, with a focus on the user and an emphasis on prevention. That has to be the number one objective, because if it's detection, it's already happened, it's too late. I can't outrun a microprocessor. Shadow IT, you know, we've been hearing about this for a long, long time when CASB solutions came about, but this is now, again, really becoming a bigger problem as everything is shifting to the cloud, right? Our on-premise, to be able to discern what is and what isn't shadow is going to be very critical, but also really encourage everybody to get all of their team members, all of the stakeholders together and get them engaged. And I think that will shift the cultural view of, because most of the time, if you talk to your employees, the only reason they're going out and using Dropbox is because they're trying to get their job done. It's not because they're trying to usurp or circumvent policies. And so discovering these reasons for moving to shadow, you then can implement the right policies into your organization. You know, it sounds so simple. And if you thought it was tough before when you had it all within your own data center and within your own perimeter, world is much, much more challenging today, especially as we introduce public cloud and multiple public cloud providers. This environment screams for the right tools. And I'll tell you, you know, I'll give you maybe a very simple example of how we make a mistake. You know, we go into the cloud, we notice that they have a load balancer. It's called the ELB. So we go to the guy that's always managed the load balancer that we have from F5 and say, hey, Bill, you're all familiar with that F5 load balancer. Will you get this configured and set up? The idea or the notion that just because it's called an elastic load balancer has the same name, that it's the same, is folly. And what oftentimes we do is we rush into those environments with all of the back knowledge and we bring it forward thinking we'll use it for this environment. And that really has to change because things are vastly different in the cloud. And as a result, you need the right tools that enable. And again, I mentioned in this environment, it can be very, very lumpy because the controls you have available to you in AWS may not run exactly parallel and align with the controls you have in Google or in AWS or in Azure, I should say. And so it's really important to look to harmonize so that you can implement a common policy and controls across these multi-cloud environments. And what exacerbates it all is this ephemeral nature. I mean, we love it, we hate it. We love it. And let me give you an example of where this really plays havoc. Jacob and I can remember this, right? Hey, we got a problem. And I'm going to say, well, Jacob, well, what's the IP address? Okay. I mean, that's kind of was almost like the starting blocks of any troubleshooting or problem solving. Well, the fact is, ladies and gentlemen, that may not really matter when you have a function that uses multiple IP addresses for seconds or less, right? So we can't apply the old way of thinking. We need new technologies. We need to really change the way we are building out and make sure that we have the right technology for our needs, our environment, and our level of use within the cloud. So the reality is, and I mentioned this already, you know, all cloud providers are not created equal. And we on the other side of the fence, it's why containers have become so popular, is we like that fluidity and that ability to move, right? Wherever we want, whenever we want, even if maybe it's just for leverage. And so it is essential to build architectures that are fluid, that are flexible. And what you want to try to do is, and this is where it gets really, really tough, quite frankly, because the pace and change in the cloud is so great that it's difficult to keep up with the stuff that's going on, especially if you're trying to keep up across multiple cloud providers. Just the overwhelming number of new announcements, new features, new capabilities, it's really daunting. And the fact is, the starting point, again, I mentioned, is you have to have a tool set that's going to allow you to clearly, unequivocally see your inventory, see all of your assets across multiple clouds, and allow you to make some sense out of it. That's what really is so key, some context, because oftentimes that's missing in the cloud. Listen, everything's shifting to SaaS, to cloud. We're abstracting and virtualizing everything, but you really need to be very, very familiar with and get some experts, because you need to be able to accommodate the speed at which you are able to move in the cloud. This is something that is absolutely key. Go back, find out where the shadow IT is, make sure that you're aligning your organization and the applications that you're subscribing to accommodate and meet the user's needs, but also that align with your policies, that align with your practices. That's what's going to allow you really to take advantage of the speed. You have to be able to accommodate change. Resiliency, key to resiliency is constantly getting bombarded with these new challenges and being able to bounce back and correct yourself, right yourself. And this has to occur through automation. This has to occur through utilizing the tools and the technologies that they're building. But again, you're gonna need to have the right tools in place to allow you to really move at speed and scale. Now, this slide is really kind of just to step back and look at the world that you live in, the world of a CISO, the world of the information security practitioners and what you have to go through. And this is what you have to do every day, all the time, 24/7. You've got to have all of the right safeguards in place. You have to identify all of the risks that are occurring. You have to be able to monitor and detect all of these events. And you need to be able to immediately respond, recover, and go back and do it over again, over and over and over every day. It's very daunting. It's quite a challenge. And the only way you're going to be able to do it is to really put in place the tools in a platform. And I encourage you, look at how this market has evolved. I was with a company called Dome9. Dome9 got acquired by Checkpoint in 2018. I mentioned that earlier. Dome9 was the granddaddy of cloud security posture management before it was actually even a category. And combined with the technologies that we've been building for years, we've been able to build out through additional acquisitions, Protego and others. We're actually building a complete platform that can give you the network security and threat prevention you're accustomed to having on-prem and in your private cloud, literally the leading posture management solution. We're building out and have recently announced new workload protection and API protection capabilities in our platform, and really bolstering the threat hunting technologies. And you can see a trend towards the XDR, EDR world. So if we kind of break these down, This is what we've been doing for more than 25 years, ladies and gentlemen. This is what we're known for. We invented stateful inspection, but bringing all of the network security expertise that we've had is absolutely essential. And it's been up-leveled, upgraded, if you will, to understand the elasticity and the ephemeral aspect of the cloud and where that's different than an on-premise or fixed gateway. It is able in a single policy editor to truly manage and define policy across all these disparate environments, some 84 different products now that you're able to unify. I mentioned our posture management. This literally was the first cloud security posture management in the market. Zohar Alan, he was, if any of you are familiar with Checkpoint from years ago, we had a product called Provider One. Remember that? Provider One was the tool you would use to manage. If you were a managed security service provider, you'd manage all your customers with Provider One. Well, Zohar and his cousin and some other folks created Dome 9 with that same logic, and you can understand it works really well in this multi-tenant, multi-cloud world. But it's a brilliant tool. I really encourage you to take a look at it. It's really intuitive, very, very simple. And it really formed the basis for us to build out CloudGuard, which we've rebranded the name. CloudGuard is a platform, truly a platform, and I'll show you again in a second, that is incorporating application security, API security, workload security, and this is really essential because this is what's happened with the cloud. The cloud has just been racing, and on one hand we have infra as code and functions and Lambda and the like, and on the other hand we have the same thing that I had on premise, but I'm moving it into the cloud. I mean, there's this huge range, and each one of these require the appropriate and specific tools to do the job. Now, the last one is the whole idea of threat hunting, and this has really become evident and critically needed by you as we've seen these supply chain attacks, and more specifically even your supply chain and software life cycle. You need tools to assure the integrity and capability of that environment as well. Our belief is that there are three key pillars to our CloudGuard platform. Unprecedented, unequaled security, the ability to automate and to literally be able to do it everywhere and anywhere. This is really what we are all about, to enable you to be able to take advantage of the cloud, to truly move at the speed of cloud. Now, this is, this stuff gets outdated so quickly because we're coming out with new stuff all the time. But this is the CloudGuard platform, which is part of the Infinity architecture. And I really encourage you, ladies and gentlemen, to take a look at our Infinity architecture, the ability to go to a web portal, set up an account, and then create and secure, create policies and secure across 80 plus different products, from network to cloud to mobile to IoT. It's really pretty remarkable. But within cloud itself, what we're seeing is that it's just continuing to expand like our own universe. And you need tools that can harmonize and unify each of these functionalities, each of these capabilities within multiple cloud environments. And again, that's what makes it challenging. If you're only using Azure, if you're only using Google, only using AWS or Oracle or Alibaba or any of the others, and nobody else, the likelihood of you really needing a third-party tool is reduced. There's still some terrific attributes and capabilities, I would argue, but the second you introduce a second cloud environment, and you're trying to do all these things the same way, that's where it really gets untenable and makes more sense to consider looking at a true multi-tool, multi-cloud tool that was designed to harmonize all of those environments for you. And listen, this is, one of the things I was just starting to write this blog yesterday. It's been 3 years. And 3 years ago, we really weren't even talking about CSPM, okay? But today, now, we're talking about CIEM, CSPM, CWPP. I mean, there's all these acronyms that are all contained within the cloud. And the fact of the matter is, this is really causing challenges for all of you. I'm trying to pull up a slide so I could show and speak to, cloud security today. I'm looking at this vendor landscape and adjacencies graph from a Gartner report. And, 3 years ago, we were just starting to talk about CSPM. Today, CIEM, CWPP, CASB, SSPM, and CSPM. And I could rattle off what all of those mean. And that's not even also talking about identity governance and access. The whole identity access management space, it's getting very muddled because everything has an identity today. Every app, every function, everything. And that's changing our world, but it's critically needed so that we can build out that zero trust model like we talked about. So I really encourage you, do your homework, check them out. We'd love to have a chance, of course, to talk with you and show you what we have, because it's really, really critical that you get a tool that you're going to be able to use across all of those environments. So I think I'm giving a little bit of time back, but I want to say thank you all very, very much. Happy to answer any questions that I can. And if I can't, I promise I'll find an answer for you. But with that, I'm going to give it back to you, Mr. Bardeen.
Hey, thanks, Grant. If there are any questions, please enter them in the Q&A box down in the lower right. Don't think we have any at the moment, but if anybody has any questions, we'll kind of hang out a few minutes and see if anything gets entered.
Okay. Ask away, ask away. How about you, Jason? Any questions from you?
Yeah, maybe while we're waiting, kind of what are the top 3 things, kind of what you see overall in your travels? What are kind of the top 3 issues that you kind of see, or the mistakes that you see folks kind of make over and over again?
Yeah, it's funny you asked that, Jacob. I just did a like a 6-part video series with one of our partners, and they were just little short 5-10 minute blurbs, but they were talking about the common mistakes, and it's the things you already know, right? Overly permissive resources and storage. I mean, that's the biggest one. I think it's the #1 concern of enterprises today is a misconfiguration, right? That's why posture management has become so popular. Key rotation, right? Good key management, key hygiene, surprisingly, is still a real problem. We've been hearing about that one forever. I think, this is again, something that I don't know how we can get out of, but I talked to a guy, I had a guy on my podcast who worked for Visa, okay? And he was really early, and he took everything he knew and had learned from on-premise and applied that when he went up and built their first cloud. And he acknowledged how it was just a major mistake, because there are so many things that are subtly different. There are little nuances. And so he was a huge advocate of don't just do it because that's how you've always done it. Learn and really understand the environment so that you can do it natively.
Okay, thank you. Now, we do have a question from George Freeman.
Yeah.
What direction are cloud policies heading? Based on the model, what is allowed, sort of like a firewall, what is controlled? So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's a very good question, because I think, so here's what I believe is happening. We tend to be linear in the way we solve our problems. And as we've all just run headlong into the cloud, the first knot, and it's a big one, is the posture management, right? In tandem, and this is, George, to your question, I think, we've been talking about this whole zero trust model. And I really think that's where we're trying to get. We're trying to get to a point where I'm identifying with very, very narrow scope the interaction and communication and connectivity between two resources so that it's only what it needs. I mean, and this is not easy because, a lot of, as we're racing in and developers are getting, more and more powerful, if they can't get something done, and George just said, hey, Jacob, I need that app now. I need it by the end of the day. And Jacob's working and can't get that one bug fixed until he realizes he changed it to an asterisk star or a dot star, right? He puts in a wild card that allows anything, and hey, it works. And this is the kind of thing where, hey, that's no harm, no foul, but that could potentially really have catastrophic consequences. So I think we're building more and more of our environments, or trying to get to that zero trust. Yeah, you're right. I know. Look, I'll give you another one, George. Let's talk about Epic. I just heard somebody talking about moving Epic. This is the electronic patient records, right? I mean, there's been people implementing Epic for over a decade. So there's no question. The only way we're going to get there quickly, George, in my opinion, is if we take it like an Etch-a-Sketch, turn it upside down, shake it, and then start new. And that's just not practical either. And that's why it's a challenge. And I think what we need to do is we need to build baby steps that we can slowly drive in the direction we want to achieve, or quickly, depending on, the capabilities. But it's a good point.
Yeah, Grant, just to close the loop, I'm not sure the audience can see the Q&A section there. So I think George had a follow-on question, sort of whether zero trust, what was really realistic to implement and practical.
Oh, right. Okay, yeah, so I'm sorry. I was talking to George based on his comment, but I didn't explain. So the question is what the direction you asked that, and then he wrote, basically in response to my comment about zero trust, that Beyond Corporate took Google 6 years to implement. Is that really practical? And I totally appreciate that. But again, I think we're at a point where, listen, I just bought a brand new house. It's not a brand new house. It was built in 1920. The front yard, the yard in total was grass that had been there for 100 years. And I just had them come in and scrape it all off. I wasn't going to try to use weed killer or use moss killer, or, I just said, I'm going to start over. Now my yard looks like crap because it's all dirt, but my hope is this fall we'll have hydro seed and we'll start new. But that's kind of what I think we need to do if we really want to get there cleanly. And I know that's not real practical for everyone. Okay.
Yeah, we got one more question from David.
Oh, I didn't see. Here we go. How do we think about the firewall to keep up with resources all over the cloud? David, great question. I think, look, at the firewall is changing also, right? In fact, Roy, the co-founder of Dome9, who's now like one of the main scientists for our cloud strategy, he wrote a terrific presentation, or actually delivered a great presentation. It was called "The Firewall is Dead, Long Live the Firewall," or maybe it was "The Perimeter is Dead, Long Live the Perimeter," arguably the same thing. And so I think what we can think about when we think about zero trust, what we're talking about is we're talking about putting a perimeter around the smallest potential object capable. And you still need to enforce that. So I think it's an evolution of where that perimeter resides and the technology capable of enforcing that perimeter. Doesn't necessarily have to be the way we've always seen a firewall. And in fact, I mentioned it's one of the things you're seeing all this time. I realized I had my camera off, sorry. You're seeing our policy editor, our Infinity architecture, our overall capabilities evolve to recognize and know if it's a cloud object and that it's ephemeral as opposed to a gateway that's on premise. But it's a good question.
Okay, thank you. I think that wraps it up. I don't think we have any other questions. So appreciate everyone joining, and definitely Grant, appreciate your time. And as always, a pleasure to hear you present and to get your perspective on things. And hopefully the next time will be in slightly less than 20 years.
Yeah, that's right. We got to make sure of that, Jacob. And hey, ladies and gentlemen, if you get a chance, I'd love for you to listen to my podcast, Talking Cloud. We talk about all things cloud, and I've had about 30 plus episodes. You can find it out there. So would love to have you listen. And thank you very much, Jacob. It's really great to see you.
All right. Have a good afternoon, everyone. Good morning, good evening, depending on where you are. And again, thank you all for joining.
Yeah. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.